Hey, this is Waylon from Swiftwood Bows, and we are ready to start tillering our bow. We've got it all roughed up, we've got the back cleaned up, we've got our nocks, self-nocks carved in both sides. We've got it bending nicely at a floor tiller. So I just want to talk quickly here about what tiller is, if it's something that you're not really familiar with. I have two videos that I made really talking in depth about tiller. So if you're not familiar with that concept, I really recommend that you check that video out so you know more about what we'll be talking about for the rest of this build, because tiller is really the most important process and concept for making the bow. And basically, in a nutshell, all it is, all tiller is having an even bend to the limbs so that the stress is evenly distributed throughout the entire bow and not focused in just one spot. And so just keep that concept in mind while we're talking about what we're going to be doing for the next few stages of the bow making process. We're just making the limbs bend evenly. I'm not going to show you how to make a string in this video. I already have another video that details that whole process. So I just went ahead and grabbed a tillering string that I've got sitting around that matches this bow well. But if you don't have a string and you don't know how to make strings, I'll leave a link to the string making video in the top comment on this video, and you can follow that and learn how to make your own string. So I'm going to move forward assuming that you either know how to make a string or you have a string for your bow. So I'm ready to brace this bow for the first time. So the way that I string a bow is I take the loop and I put it over the top limb and I slide it down. And then I'm going to fit the bottom loop into the string grooves and make sure that it's sitting in there nicely. On this stringer, there's a bigger cup that goes over the bottom. And there's a smaller cup that goes over the top. I'm going to put my foot here, I'm going to pull up, and I'm going to slide this top loop out to the string grooves. Like so. Now, as you can see, we're not at full brace yet. Full brace is going to be about the height of my thumb sticking up from the top of the handle. So this is what I would call low brace. I want to start off here at low brace and make sure that everything's looking good before I take some more weight off and move up to a higher brace height. So let's take a look and see what we've got here. This is the top limb. This is the bottom limb. Looking like the bottom limb is bending maybe just a little bit more than the top limb. But overall, it's a pretty even bend. I think maybe I can see a little bit more bending here than I do out here. So that's going to tell me that I need to take some more wood off out here and leave this area alone for a little bit. Out here, it's not bending quite so much out of the fades as it is on the bottom limb. It's doing more bending in here, and then it flattens out a little bit more out here, but overall I'd say the top limb has a more even bend than the bottom limb, where it's bending mostly here and straightening out here. But all in all, this is really not too bad for a first brace. I don't have any major problems that I have to worry about. Just a few minor tweaks to get things lined up like I like. And so don't be alarmed if when you're stringing your bow for the first time, something looks really off. You know, maybe you're going to have one limb that's really flat, you know, and the other limb's doing all the work, or you're going to see, you know, some particular spot that's bending too much, and other places not bending enough. That's pretty common when you're first learning how to make bows. But you have to pay attention to it right away. This is our first real opportunity to see what the tiller is looking like on our bow, and we really want to use this information the best that we can. So if you see something wrong, that you want to unstring your bow right away. You don't want to leave it strung like this. I'm leaving this strung because I feel pretty good about how this tiller is looking. But if you see a major problem, you want to address it right away. So mark off the areas that you want to avoid, mark the areas that you want to take some wood off, and start working on evening out that tiller. Like I said, I've got a few minor things that I want to work on to straighten this out before I go any further on raising the brace height. But all in all, like I said, this is a good start. So I'm going to, let me get a pencil and I'll show you. Alright, I grabbed a marker here so it'll show it better for you. So right now, based on what I can tell, this area is doing most of the bending for this bottom, or for the, oh, that's the top limb. Let me get this flipped around here. Yeah. Okay, so this is the bottom limb. So this area is doing a little bit too much bending. So I'm just gonna make some X's here to remind myself to stay out of that area for now. But this area needs a little bit more wood taken off. So I'm just gonna make a mark like that to remind myself that's where I want to start taking off wood on this side. Now the top limb is bending more evenly throughout. I don't know that I'm going to start focusing on any one particular area more than others. So I'm just going to tell myself I need to take off some wood evenly on this top limb so that I can get it to bend evenly with the bottom limb, or even a little bit more, because remember, our top limb is a little bit longer. So the way that I can quickly kind of judge which limb is bending more is this distance between the belly and the string. And I can just tell with my eye right now that this space on the bottom limb is greater than this space over here. And so this is what we would call a negative tiller, where the bottom limb is bending a little bit more than the top limb. And our goal for this bow with asymmetrical limbs with a longer top limb is to have a positive tiller of maybe about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch. Higher space here by about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch than over here. But for right now, I just want to make sure that this is at least caught up with over here and looking good. And we can establish that positive tiller a little bit more firmly in a little bit. So I'm going to take off this wood that I marked on here, and then I'm going to string the bow back up, and I'm going to see how it's looking then. So I made some minor adjustments to the tiller since you saw the bow brace last. Here's a look at how it's bending right now. We're still kind of at a medium brace now, not quite all the way up. to full brace. And I just wanted to kind of give you something to work towards. This is my lower limb. This was where it was bending too much. You can see I still have it marked there. I haven't taken any wood off. I've taken some wood off out here to get the rest of the limb bending more evenly. And I've gotten the top limb bending more than the bottom limb, which is what I want. I'll show you here. So the bottom limb is just under 5.5 inches. And the top limb is just under 5 3/4. So that's about a 1/4 inch positive tiller, which is just about perfect for what I want. So I've got the limbs bending the right amount relative to each other, meaning I've got they're pretty much even with the top limb bending just a little bit more, and I've got a pretty even bend. I think I still need to tinker around with it a little bit to get it bending as well as I'd like, but we're getting pretty close. And so some things that I do to determine whether it's good or not. I'm always going to go back to using my fingers to feel for thin spots and thick spots. And right now, it's feeling pretty good. I guess right here, feeling a little bit of a thin spot. I'm going to mark that. With an X. And then out here, it feels a little thicker. It shouldn't feel thicker. It shouldn't feel thicker here than it does here. This should be thicker, progressing out to thinner. And so this area right here needs to have some wood taken off of it. This feels pretty good. A nice smooth transition. So always pay attention to your fingers, don't ignore them. But there's some other tools that we can use. You can take, this is just a piece of wood that's kind of designed for this purpose, but it's certainly not essential. I often just use the edge of a scraper. But what you can do is you can set it, trying to get that lined up for you there. You can set it on the belly, and then you can slide it along, and you can look at the gap between the belly and the middle of the block. And it should stay pretty consistent. If you see an area where the bow flattens out and that space shrinks, that's going to be a spot that needs some wood taken off. And if you see a spot where there's a whole lot more space than other places, that's a weak spot that needs to be left alone. So this is another way that you can measure the bend at this point. It really only works on clean, straight limb bows like this. If you have much character going on in your limbs, it's really hard to rely on that. And that's why I think it's one good idea, or one reason that it's a good idea to keep your first few bows straight and clean and simple without a lot going on, because it's challenging enough to get the hang of the tillering. So I just want to share a couple basic principles that we're going to follow as we are tillering the bow. So in my mind, I'm planning for this bow to be 45 pounds at 28 inches. And so I had that in mind when I designed the limbs, when I did the width and the length. And so I'm going to be careful never to draw this bow more than 45 pounds worth of pulling. And right now, that means that I'm only pulling it out to about 15 inches. That's where I hit 45 pounds, and that's where I stop. And as I take more wood off the belly, then it's going to pull further and further at that 45 pounds. But that, it gives you a benchmark to stop at, so that you're not overstraining your bow at any given point during the process, and it'll help you avoid your bow taking set. And if you don't know what set is, that is when the wood fibers on the belly become crushed and damaged. It's not something that's always visible to see in terms of what's happening with the fibers on the belly, but you do see it when you unstring the bow, and instead of the bow returning all the way back to the shape that it was before, it's going to follow the string a little bit, so they say. And set is something that we want to avoid because it's going to rob our bow of performance. You're going to expect to take a little bit of set whenever you make a wooden bow. It's just part of the nature of the process. But through well-seasoned wood and good design and careful tillering, we can really keep it to a minimum so that we have an effective and long-lasting bow. So you can see when I unstrung my bow, it returned to that straight profile. And I'll expect, especially with a wood like hickory, that by the time I get out to full draw and have the bow shooting, there's probably going to be a little bit of string follow, and that's okay. I just want to avoid having a lot of it. So I want to show you the tool that I use to tiller my bow. And before I show you, I just want to let you know that it's not essential that you have one of these. It's a very useful tool if you've got space for it. It's easy to make. It doesn't cost very much money. I highly recommend it. But there's a few other ways that you can tiller your bow. Obviously, people have been making bows for tens of thousands of years, and they haven't always had these to make them with. So if you don't have the space or the budget for something like this, a great tool is using a mirror, like a full-length mirror, and standing in front of it and kind of pulling your bow, and you can judge the tiller based on the reflection in the mirror. You could have another friend who knows what they're looking for to stand and watch. So the nice thing about that method is that you always get the most accurate picture of how a bow is bending when it's getting pulled by hand. The downside is that it's difficult to monitor draw weight and draw length. I mean, if you know what your own draw length is, and you know, and you've had a lot of experience shooting bows, so you can have a good feel for where a bow's at, it can be perfectly fine, especially if you're just kind of building the bow for yourself, and you can just stop where it feels comfortable. But you do run the risk, if you're not careful, of overdrawing your bow in terms of drawing more weight than you're shooting for your final draw weight. So let me show you how I use this. It's called a tillering tree. So the basic components are, there's a pulley down here, and there's a rest up here for the bow to sit in. I just have a crook of a yew branch bolted onto the wall, but you could build one out of blocks of wood just as easily. It just creates a little cradle for the handle of the bow to rest in. And then I have this ruler here, and it's set at just the right height so that the top of the ruler is going to be about flush with the back of the bow, because that's where you measure draw length from. That's important to remember. And then I've got a hanging scale here attached to a rope that goes down through the pulley. So let me string my bow here, and I will show you how I use it. just rest the handle here. My handle's still kind of fat, so it doesn't fit in there super well, but it's fine. And I try to have the bow resting higher up on the handle, kind of where your hand would be, and I try to get the weight attached to the string about where the arrow would be. That gives me the most accurate reading. Sometimes you have to play around with it a little bit to get it just right. So let me check and make sure that the camera can see it fine. So I'll stand back here and move the camera a little bit. So what I can do with this is I can pull on the rope and it bends my bow for me. I'm going to center the bow a little bit better. So I can pull on the rope and it bends the bow for me. I can stand back at a safe distance just in case the bow breaks. Of course it's not going to. And I can see really accurately by reading the scale. So right now if I pull it to 15 inches, I'm at 45 pounds. So that's as far as I'm going to go right now. And it gives me a chance to just see how each limb is working, whether there's any stiff spots. And as I take more wood off, I'll be able to pull it further down until I get out to my target draw length of 28. So in terms of what I'm seeing on this bow right now, all in all, I think it's bending pretty well. I think I've got the stiff spot kind of about mid-limb on each limb. I think I need to get my mid-limbs working a little bit more. I think it's doing a little bit too much work on the inner thirds, and it's flattening out a little bit out here. So I'm going to get the bow working a little bit more out here, and I think pretty soon here I'm ready to twist my bowstring and make it a little shorter and get all the way up to full brace. And that's going to give me a little bit better picture of what the tiller's looking like. So I'm going to work on my stiff spots. I'm going to get it up to full brace, and I'll show it to you again, see the progress we made. I just want to make a couple quick points that may not be obvious if you haven't worked with wooden bows before. We never want to leave our bow strung, especially at this stage. With the bow so stiff, it's still under, or it's under quite a bit of pressure when it's strung, and especially if the tiller's not perfect, we can end up causing some set on the bow. So only have it strung for as long as you need to assess what you need to do differently. Then unstring it and start working on it again. Never leave it strung overnight or you're going to regret it. Sorry, I got lots of mosquitoes in here. And the other point that I wanted to make was the nice thing about this tillering tree is that you can pull it out and then let it go right away, and pull it out and let it go. I know there's a lot of people that use something called a tillering stick, which is basically just a wooden stand with a rest on the top, and you put the bow handle on there and you stretch the bow down and you hook a string into a notch, and then you step back and look at it. Well, the problem with that is that it's holding the bow drawn for an extended period of time while you're looking at it. And even just more than a few seconds can cause damage to the bow. I see people posting pictures of their bow on at full draw on a tillering stick, and just thinking about the time that it took them to step away from their bow and get their camera ready and take a picture and get back and unstring their bow. It's just not good for these bows. And so I recommend not using a tillering stick. You're better off just tillering by hand if you don't have a place to set up a tillering tree. So in addition to the tiller being balanced, the limbs bending evenly with each other, there's another symmetry that we want to achieve that is called string alignment. And that means that we want the string to pass straight through the center of the handle. And I can show you what that looks like. This bow has really good string alignment. I didn't have to do anything to fix it. Hopefully on your first few bows you're not going to have to worry about that. If you pick out a perfectly straight stave, it shouldn't be too much of an issue, though sometimes you can get surprised. So let me show you, see if I can line this up with the camera here, so you can see what good string alignment looks like. Alright, so that's what it should look like. The string should be splitting straight down through the center of the handle. And if you see it off to one side, so when the bow's hanging freely, you should be sighting straight down the center. It can be a trick. You want to be careful that you're not moving your head to one side or the other to give yourself the illusion that you have a good string alignment. You can also hang the bow on your fingers and then just look straight down from the string, and it should be splitting the center of the handle. Once again, it's easy to move things around to match what you want it to look like, but you want to make sure that string is going through the center of the handle. If it's not, I'm not going to get into I'm not going to show how to fix it, but I can kind of briefly explain. Usually the best solution is to use steam or a heat gun to heat up the handle section and to take the string off. But you would heat up the handle section and you would use clamps and jigs to bend the bow at the handle, to get the limbs to flip out in the direction that you need to, so that the string is tracking down the center. So just be mindful of that. Check your bow, make sure that the string is going through the center of the handle. So I've been doing some work on the tiller, looking for stiff spots, getting the limbs balanced out with each other, and show you what we've got so far. So remember I said my goal for this bow was 45 pounds of draw weight. So right now 45 pounds is happening right there at 17 inches of draw. So I want to get it out to 45 pounds at 28 inches. So I've still got a ways to go. But I like what I'm seeing here for the tiller so far. The top limb is on the right. It's bending just a little bit more than the bottom limb on the left. But each limb has its own healthy bend, evenly distributed from the fades out to the tip. So I'm going to take a slight break from the tillering. This will be the end of this video. Obviously the tillering's not finished yet, but I want to take a break and I want to get the handle shaped to the final dimensions, and I want to get the tips shaped to the final dimensions. And this could happen later in the process. Could have happened earlier in the process too if we wanted it to. I'm choosing to do it right now because I don't like to wait too late to get the tips and the handles refined, because I don't want to have any surprises. I don't want it to possibly affect my tiller at all. It shouldn't, because this whole section here isn't doing any bending. But if you get carried away, it's possible that you could bring the bend in a little further than you anticipated. And I would rather do that now while I still have some wood to work with, to balance things back out, than to do it at the last minute when I've already got the bow tillered out just like I wanted it to, and it possibly make your bow come in under the draw weight that you wanted. So the next video is going to be how to shape the handle and how to refine the tips. Thanks for watching, and we'll move on to the next step.